Beep, 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 beep. Welcome, hello to the court of the Edijester. You are most welcome. How are we doing today? News reaches me from Europe. I found a rather interesting thread of tweetings that I thought you might find interesting about the EU's 220 million euro plot to push radical gender ideology. Now, this is from MCC Brussels, who are all about keeping an eye on it, but also about free speech and various other things. So they keep a very firm eye on what's going on in the EU, and this is of particular interest, I think. 220 million euros is an awful lot of money. So what have they got to say? Well, before they do become a warrior teacher or buy me a coffee. Help to keep me going if you can, please. It's the only way I can keep going. So, advance release of our new report from Ashley A. Frawley reveals that that's at Ashley A. Frawley, reveals that over 221 million in EU funds have been funneled into promoting a radical gender identity agenda, undermining women's rights, child protection, and national sovereignty. At least 40.5 million euros directly went to the most extreme transgender advocacy groups. Now, why? Why on earth would Europe want to do that, I wonder? Anybody got the answer? Because I'm damned if I do. What the hell are they playing at? Activist NGOs, this is secret lobbying here, activist NGOs have openly lobbied EU bodies to adopt gender identity policies. ILGA urged politicians to operate out of the public eye, and over 1,000 MEP candidates signed a pledge to support this secrecy around gender legislation. Absolutely unbelievable. Why would they do that? This agenda that's going on, it's, in some ways it's completely crazy to think that this is at the scale that it is, but this is the scale that it is. 1,000 MEPs signed a pledge to support secrecy so that they could lobby for transgenderism. Dear me, goodness knows what's really behind this. Extreme new policies. NGO activity culminated in the EU adopting a policy explicitly calling for self-ID with no age restrictions. Self-ID with no age restrictions. They want the children. The same NGOs push for child gender transition to be hidden from parents and for courts to force parental compliance. Well, the NGOs are pushing for it. So why are 1,000 MEPs saying we'll keep quiet about it? What is the actual agenda here behind all of this? Why are they so bothered by the distinction between the sexes and by the existence of homosexuality and by the need for safety of women and children? On a global scale, what kind of place is like that? There's something very odd going on here. Even more odd than normal, and that's saying something from me. These NGOs have enjoyed repeated private meetings with high-level officials and been intimately involved in key legislation. They, not voters, call the shots, even steering human rights law. The proposed undermining national sovereignty is next. The proposed EU certificate of parenthood would force all member states to recognise Brussels' definition of parenthood, even if it contradicts local law. Schools in some countries, on advice of radical NGOs, already conceal children's gender transition from parents. I'm intrigued to know, because I was indifferent about whether we stayed in Europe or not, but I would now say that I would vote to get out, and I think by getting out of Europe, we've really seriously dodged a bullet. The problem we've got is that Starmer's more than intent on going back to licky bum with the European Union. That's the biggest problem of all, isn't it? Starmer brown-nosing up the Brussels backside. Let me know what you think, as I'm sure you will. I think we dodged a bullet, and I think the sooner we get rid of the human rights law in this country and get our own way of doing things, the better. Funding a radical agenda. Civil society is being bought off to give the EU legitimacy, while ideologues radicalise its policies under the guise of public representation. A single organisation, ILGA, secured 64.95 million. 65 million, I might have said it, euro. This unprecedented spending shapes EU policy with minimal democratic debate or transparency. weaponized research. Large Horizon Europe grants now prioritise ideological conclusions such as challenging the gender binary, which got 2 million euros, and Men for Dem, 3 million euros, casting traditional masculinity as a threat to democracy. Why on earth would they do that? Why on earth would they do that? The shift from violence against women, this is under women's rights under threat, to gender-based violence dilutes protections for biological females. Single-sex spaces and women's sports face increasing uncertainty under policies that champion self-identification. Time to challenge the system. At Ferretti Bite, that's Frank Ferretti, Executive Director of MCC Brussels, warns of a corruption of political processes and urges total overhaul of EU funding allocations to ensure that policy is shaped through genuine, open debate, not activist-driven secrecy. Now, this here is called, the report that's come here from the team, from Frank and the team, is called the EU's Radical Gender Agenda, the EU Department of Government Efficiency. So, in other words, what we're seeing here is the kind of revelation that we're seeing in the USA with Donald Trump and Elon Musk taking a chainsaw to the nonsense bureaucracy and gender critical race theory, all the rubbish over there. This is somebody pointing out that, in fact, the same thing is happening in Europe with this the EU's radical gender agenda. And I still have to wonder why. You know, why? Why are they doing it? Why? Because it seems to me the strangest thing to do. So what is the actual agenda? That's the question that I seem to regularly find myself unable to answer very clearly. What is the end game? Well, the end game, as far as I'm concerned, is that these people believe they are building a utopian world and that the world will be a better place because of it. And nothing is more dangerous than utopian ideology, because utopian ideology kills. People think they're doing a good thing. You know, that's what Solzhenitsyn wrote about in the Gulag Archipelago. That's what many people have written about when it came to Nazis. It's the utopian idea that things can be made perfect by interference. And it's usually too late because people don't speak up. That's the trouble. They don't speak up and say anything because they don't see it coming. This is the same kind of stuff as we've seen before, this utopian idea. This is all tied up with everything we know about the UNESCO goals, about ESG, social emotional learning, EDI, or DEI. No, they've renamed it, by the way, to DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Thanks very much. You can get in the bin. Let me know what you think in the comments. I think this is quite surprising, but it needs investigating. And I hope that MCC Brussels, under Frank's auspice, will look further and let us know more. Links in the doobers as usual. Please do become a warrior teacher starting in April, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.